for macro photography. We will be going outside, but you do have a few options of what you take pictures of. So macro photography is a unique form of photography that involves photographing small objects to make them look life-size or larger than life in the photo. The usual subjects include flowers and small insects, which we don't normally get to see up close with the naked eye. But nature in general is kind of the go-to, but also you'll have some other options that isn't nature-based. So here are a couple examples of macro photography. On the left, you have a dandelion that has some water droplets on the seeds. And then on the right, we have a really zoomed up look of bark on a tree. When you're taking your pictures, you're going to be using a priority, meaning aperture priority. You'll have complete control of the aperture, and then the camera will figure out the shutter speed for you so that way you have the correct exposure. By controlling the aperture, you're able to really utilize shallow depth of field to give you the best effect. So the trick for this is keeping your aperture number low. So f4, 5.6, those will be your go-tos. By having a shallow depth of field, you have a little bit in focus and then a lot of blur. So this way you can really zone in and focus on your subject, and then the background or anything that's in front of your object will be blurred and won't take away from your subject matter. So here's an example of shallow depth of field being used on these flowers. So you can see that in the foreground, whatever's up front is blurry. The background is also blurry, but then the middle ground is where you have that focus. So you can really look at all the little details that are within those leaves and petals. So another example, the foreground, so whatever's in front is nice and sharp, and as you move further away from the camera, you get that blur. Here we have the middle ground in focus. So everything in front and in back is blurry, and the middle is nice and sharp. So you will be able to control how you focus, so that way you can pinpoint exactly what is nice and sharp. Another way macro photography is used is with photographing water droplets. So for those of you that had Photo 1 last semester, we did the oil and water project where you had images on your iPad projected underneath water or oil, and then you were able to see the image through the water droplets. So this is kind of that same idea. So shallow depth of field, focusing on the water droplets, and then you have within them the image of the flower from the background. If you were to have deeper depth of field where more would be sharp, you would lose a lot of the detail, and also you would be distracted by the flower in the background. So having that shallow depth of field is key. But even water droplets on their own, without that refraction look, still have a pretty cool look. We will have some spray bottles available so you can kind of spritz nature to add some water droplets if need be. If you're not into nature photography, car macro photography is a thing. So for this, you're using a larger subject matter, but you're really focusing on small, intricate details that you're zooming into and creating larger than life images. So here we have the door handle, right? So it becomes about the reflection that's in the handle, some of the detail that's in there, the scuff marks, rims on the wheels. Okay, once again, you're not seeing the entire wheel or the entire car, you're really zoomed in up close. The engine and all the parts that go into cars are also really great for this. There's a lot of textures and patterns and repetition that are shown throughout, so you can really kind of zone in and focus on that. We don't necessarily have to know what it is we're looking at, so it can be similar to that abstract imagery. Some more details of specific parts of the car. Still utilizing that shallow depth of field. So here on the stick shift, you have the focus on the 2, 4, and R, and the background has that blur. Non-nature things that you also have options to shoot would be just anything non-naturey. So on the left we have a zipper, on the right we have a rusty nut and screw on something. And once again, this is more about finding those little details, making them larger than life. So outside by the creek area, we do have non-nature things. There's fences, there's benches, there's signs, there's fire hydrants, all sorts of stuff. So you can definitely find something to photograph. If you want to bring in specific objects to photograph, you can do that as well. So we can bring out our studio stands and utilize those outside. So here we have a fork. Not really sure what this object is, but definitely larger than life. You have that shallow depth of field. Okay, matches. Some tips and tricks. So definitely choose your subject wisely. Don't just photograph the first pretty thing you see. Sometimes the ugly is just as good, if not better. Pay attention to lighting and shadows. All of that is key. Hopefully it'll be sunny, so we'll have good lighting, we'll have some shadows, so you can kind of play with that. Composition, as always, is super, super important. So try different angles of the same subject. Don't just be one and done with a subject. Shoot from above, shoot from below. Remember all those compositional devices from Photo 1. Bird's eye view, worm's eye view. Rule of thirds. Shallow depth of field will be your best friend, so definitely utilize that. Remember, a little aperture number gives you that shallow depth of field. And with that, choose your focus wisely. You are manually going to be focusing on your objects. So foreground, middle ground, background. Right? Decide what you want to be in focus. Okay. Also take tons of photographs. If you think you took enough, take at least 20 more. And then another 10. And then one more for good luck. Okay, so I don't have a specific number of initial images. You're just going to spend the entire class time just taking pictures. Just picture after picture after picture after picture. Okay, just take them all. If you're feeling adventurous, you can try toy photography. So this is using macro photography to photograph toys to tell a story. So if you don't want to do the nature or the objects or the car, and you want to give this a try, you are more than welcome to. This again, we would take the studio stands outside, or you could have the toys just out in nature interacting with the world around you. But this is more than just a toy on a plain background. Okay? You really wanted to tell a story, so no boring pictures. Here, this artist has little figurines and set them up within a small environment. Okay. So shallow depth of field, forced perspective, interaction with the environment, telling a story, mixing different kinds of toys, and even photoshopping out supports are all different ways to dive into this. So with shallow depth of field, we've already covered that. But that idea that you have that sliver of sharpness on whatever your main focal point is. Okay? So because you're shooting these small objects, okay, having that shallow depth of field will also help give them more of that focal point. So here, these are just shot right on the sidewalk or the street. Okay, but you have that shallow depth of field, so you can't really tell how small they actually are because you have no reference to regular sized objects behind and around them. Okay, same with this. You have the line of little toy animals. Forced perspective is when you can make a toy look huge by putting it very close to the camera. So this is useful if you want to use it with normal sized people and large objects. Okay, so essentially getting right up and personal with your toy and then shooting from a specific angle will help make them look larger than life. So here the toy looks really big and comparable to the car in the background. Here, this Lego figurine also looks like they could maybe be regular sized with the people in the background. Interacting with the environment. So instead of just having your toy just standing doing nothing, which is boring, have it interact with the environment. You can pick an environment that matches the toy, or if you can't find one, make one. Okay, so here we have this toy truck that's out in the dirt and it has these twigs and sticks that it's picking up and putting onto the back. A little swamp monster in a pond. Army guy finding a crab. Adding some water to make it rain. So you can kind of see what this can look like setup wise and what the final result is. Just overall telling a story. So having toys interact with each other, interact with other objects or props, with the background, the environment. Okay, so here we have these little toys that are doing kind of a CSI thing on a dead bee. And we got the Monsters Inc. guys with a bottle of Visine. Okay, we got the jewelry gem robber, hiding from the cops. A little Star Wars fun. Scooby-Doo and chased by a dino. So you can definitely, have fun with it, try out different things. There was even a whole wedding that was shot with Legos. So if you look at, wedding photography, this artist, Chris Wallace, did this whole Lego wedding photo shoot. You can also mix different kinds of toys. So we do have some toys available for you to work with, but it's a bit limited. So I suggest if you do want to go this route, you bring some toys from home if you have any. Borrow them from siblings, from cousins, maybe if you babysit, borrow some from the kids, because that can give you some more stuff to work with. And then if you're feeling even more advanced, we can do some Photoshop to edit out some strings. So if you want, stuff flying or floating, we can work in Photoshop to delete all of that out. So plan for a photo shoot. Be ready to take pictures.